Hello all, welcome to the channel. Suppose that one of Hollywood's most renowned actresses has a late-night studio appearance to promote her new project with the expectation of an easygoing, casual interview. And instead of charm and standard questions, she receives comments that are less curious and more quietly biting. What begins as a promotional visit all too soon becomes a fiery confrontation that no one in the audience or tuning in at home saw coming. This is not simply some celebrity losing her temper. This is about violating professional boundaries, disrespect, and where it all went too far. Viola Davis walked onto the set with her characteristic poise and refinement, bearing the composed assurance of someone who's been decades in the business, honing the craft. She was there to discuss a new drama that had already started creating significant award buzz. The audience greeted her graciously, applauding while laughing and smiling as she sat down. All seemed routine, just another stop on a press tour. The cameras rolled. The lights were on. The host leaned forward with a familiar smile and began with what appeared to be a warm welcome. "Viola, welcome back. Always wonderful to have you." There was something about his tone, though, that didn't ring quite true. There was a note underneath, perhaps smugness, perhaps something else entirely. Viola answered generously, assuming the interview would be about her new position, her storytelling technique, or the individual she had worked with. These were the types of interviews she had given 1,000 times before. And then there was the turn. The host settled back in his chair and commented, "You know, I've been considering your career trajectory. Do you ever think you've been typecast?" The words themselves may have been innocuous. Actors are asked about typecasting all the time. But the tone, the timing, and the smirk gave the intent a less considerate and more barbed feel. He went on before she had a chance to even completely answer. "I mean, come on. You always tend to play the tough, fighting woman who must battle through suffering and adversity. You think that's because Hollywood views you that way?" The audience quieted. Viola's face remained composed, her practiced smile still in place. But there was a change in her expression. Her eyes sharpened. She understood where this was going. With calm precision, she replied, "I think what you're really asking is about the roles available to women who look like me in this industry." It was a courteous effort to move the dialogue back into respectful realms. But the host did not relent. Instead, he leaned into the awkwardness. "Well, yeah, exactly," he said. "When did you last play someone who wasn't struggling with trauma or injustice? Don't you ever want to play someone normal for once?" There was a perceptible change in the room's energy. Fidgeting began among audience members. Some made uncomfortable eye contact with others. This was not the type of interview they had anticipated. It was more of a challenge than a conversation. Viola breathed slowly. With years of experience speaking publicly, being interviewed, and in tough spots, she didn't lose her poise. Yet it was obvious behind the firm voice stood a woman keenly attuned to the weight of each word said and unsaid. This wasn't for her anymore. This was for the pattern, the bias, and the narrow frame through which so many black actresses are perceived in Hollywood. And it was just the start. Tough questions were mounting, yet Viola Davis remained unruffled. Her tone was still measured, her gaze unflinching. "What's key to realize," she replied with soft assurance, "is that each role I play has depth and authenticity. Indeed, most of them do involve strife. But strife is life. These are stories about people, and stories about people are never simple." But the host wasn't content. He leaned in, his voice cut with challenge. "Don't you think," he said, "that by continually casting these heavy roles, you're shutting yourself in? I mean, look at some of your contemporaries. They're expanding. comedy, action, even sci-fi. Don't you ever inquire into what it's like to experiment? Now, the interview had moved far past curiosity. His questions were becoming intrusive, less about her craft and more about undermining her choices. Viola's patience was being tested in real time. Still, she didn't flinch. "I've actually worked across a wide range of genres throughout my career," she said, her tone calm but firm. "Perhaps you're not familiar with the full scope of my filmography." That line, softly and carefully spoken, landed with accuracy. The host's smile wavered. He wasn't accustomed to having guests push back, particularly not in such a gracious manner. Most stars would have deflected the insults, let the incident pass. But Viola Davis wasn't most stars. She was a woman who had fought her way up each step in a business that never used to throw its doors very wide, and she wasn't going to let anyone downplay all the years of blood, sweat, and creativity she had invested in her craft. "Oh, I see," the host said, with an irritable tone creeping into his voice. "I just find it interesting that an artist with your ability is drawn to such dark roles. Don't you want to make people laugh? Don't you want to make people happy for a change?" That's when the interview really started to disintegrate. The insinuation in his tone was unmistakable and rude. He was implying that she did not enjoy what she did, that it was too heavy, that maybe she was too much. Viola's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. Her reply, however, was silky, earthy, and forceful. "I think there's value to every story I tell, whether it makes people happy, sad, get it, or heal. That's the thing about storytelling. It is who we are. Just because a story is somber doesn't mean it's not worth doing." But the host wasn't finished. He leaned forward, feeling for weaknesses. Rather than pulling back, he pressed further. "But surely, don't you get weary of always having these messages to deliver? Don't you ever just want to have fun with a part?" Viola sulked. And for the first time, a flicker of sharpness crept into her voice. Something that only the truly attentive would catch. "Fun," she repeated. "You think playing complex, multifaceted characters isn't fun? You think writing stories that matter, stories that alter the way people view the world, isn't rewarding?" The room was tense. You could sense it in the crowd, in the pause after each sentence. And yet, rather than acknowledging the weight of the moment, the host continued to prod. "I'm just saying," he added with a wave of his hand. "Maybe lighten up. Let people see you can do more than the serious work." And that was when something inside Viola Davis snapped. Gone was the courteous deflection. Gone was the friendly smile. In its stead stood steel. A still, restrained force that didn't have to shout to make itself understood. "Lighten up," she said again. And the tone in which she said it sent every person in that room into a freeze. Then she leaned forward just a little and said, "Tell me, when was the last time somebody told Meryl Streep to lighten up? When was the last time they told Daniel Day-Lewis to stop being serious about his job?" The host opened his mouth, suddenly aware that he had strayed across a line he could not erase. The interview, which had started as simply another talk show spot, had suddenly become something unforgettable, bitter, awkward, and profoundly revealing. "Well, I wasn't attempting to compare you to anyone," the host stuttered. "Oh, but you were," Viola interrupted, her tone adamant and just sharp enough to cut through the tension in the room. "You absolutely were." The atmosphere in the studio changed. Her voice wasn't bitter. It was authoritative. She went on, "You're sitting here questioning my creative decisions, presenting them as though they need defense. You're suggesting that I need to prove myself in a manner that white peers are never invited to. You question me about why I don't simply want to have fun, as if what I've been telling stories about for all these years doesn't count as legitimate entertainment." Now the crowd was completely silent. There was no nervous laughter, no obligatory applause, just wide eyes and suspended breath. This was no longer late-night banter. This was real, raw stuff. The host squirmed in his seat, clearly recognizing he had stepped into dangerous territory. But pride wouldn't let him apologize outright. "I think you're reading too much into what I'm saying," he offered weakly, trying to wrestle back control. "I was just trying to have a casual conversation about your career choices." Viola laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Casual? You think questioning an award-winning actress about why she chooses depth over fluff is casual? You call it casual when you suggest I've boxed myself in by telling stories that matter." She paused, her voice now cold and crystal clear. "Number, what you've done in the past 10 minutes is anything but casual. It's disrespectful." The host's face was starting to redden, clearly upset. He wasn't accustomed to being called out on his own show, particularly not so overtly. "Look, I think we're getting off base here. I was just trying to..." "You were attempting to what?" Viola cut in, closing the distance between them. "You were attempting to simplify me. To put me in a box that makes you comfortable. You were attempting to imply that the work I've spent my life on isn't sufficient, that it's not light enough, fun enough, easy enough for your taste." "I never told your work wasn't good enough," cried the host. But even he didn't sound believing in his own assertion. "You didn't have to," Viola snapped back. "It was in the way you phrased it. It was in how you described my career as something that needed fixing, rather than honoring it as intentional, thoughtful, and powerful. You couched my decisions as restrictions, as if to tell hard stories, to tell important stories, is somehow less than fun." The host attempted once more, this time grabbing for a lifeline. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I have a lot of respect for what you do. I was just wondering if you're going to try new things in the future. Comedy, action, anything other than what you're doing now." But Viola wasn't going away. "Don't redo this now," she said matter-of-factly. "You did not ask me what's next or what inspires me. You wondered why I hadn't done what other people have done, Rishwoy. You questioned if the stories I'd chosen to tell were good enough. You wondered if I'd ever considered playing someone normal, as if the women I've played, with all their complexity and humanity, aren't real." The studio was in stasis. Some of the viewers in the audience slowly put their hands to their phones, recognizing that they were experiencing something historic, a moment of truth outside a script that would spread far beyond the stage. The host scanned around the room, his confidence visibly breached. "I think maybe we should take a break," he stammered. "A break?" Viola echoed, eyes wide with disbelief. "Now? After everything you've just said, after spending this entire interview picking apart my integrity, my decisions, my worth as an artist, you think a break is going to fix it?" Off stage, the producer was frantically waving an arm wildly in a bid to signal wrap or restart. But it was too late. Viola had gained total control. The program no longer belonged to its host. It now belonged to her. She had discovered her voice, and there was no way she was going to let anyone shut it up now. "Let me tell you something about the parts I play," Viola declared, her voice vibrating with calm strength. "Each character I create is deliberate. Each narrative I share is significant. When I play a woman recovering from trauma, I'm not acting. I'm speaking for millions of women whose voices are frequently drowned out. When I remain resilient, I'm celebrating individuals who scarcely get to see themselves represented on screen." The host changed, obviously about to interrupt, but Viola raised her hand and went on. "Number, I'm not done. You asked me if I ever got to play a normal person. So let me ask you, what do you mean by normal? Because the women I play, they are normal. They are real. They are mothers, daughters, survivors, warriors. They are individuals with tales that count. And if you cannot even see the value in telling those stories with the same level of dignity as a rom-com or a superhero movie, then perhaps you're not worthy of conducting this interview. The audience was motionless. The host's face had flushed a rich red. His authority within his own domain had disintegrated, and everyone present could sense it. I think you're being a little dramatic, he said quietly. The words barely landed before the room seemed to freeze. Viola's eyes narrowed. The look she gave him was ice cold and unmistakably fierce. Dramatic? She repeated, her voice a blend of disbelief and quiet rage. You just called me dramatic for defending my career, my voice, and the work that's earned the respect of my peers and love from audiences across the globe? The audience gasped, audible and collective. You're going to sit there and minimize everything I've said, every truth I've bared, as nothing more than an emotional tantrum, she went on. Do you know how insulting that is? How sick I am of women. Black women in particular, being characterized as emotional or challenging the moment we get pushback for not taking disrespect. The host now appeared confused, sweat glistening on his forehead, searching for an escape. Viola, please. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Possibly we could begin again, discuss your new project. Viola glared at him, her incredulity clear. Begin again? She repeated slowly, unbelieving. You expect us to just wipe the last 15 minutes off the slate? You expect me to sit here and act like you didn't waste the whole interview questioning my decisions, my integrity, my work? Her tone fell, but her voice became even stronger. You've clearly gotten it wrong about the person you're talking to. Then, without saying another word, Viola rose to her feet. The mere act was like a thunderclap in the room. Guests did not stand up during an interview. They didn't leave the stage of a major network. But this was no ordinary guest. And this was certainly no ordinary interview. Sit down, please, the host ordered now, clearly shaken. His tone was no longer sharp, but almost plaintive. We're still taping. We can work this out. Work this out? Viola echoed, not budging. The only thing that requires working out here is your concept of simple respect, of how to address someone in a human manner, of how to welcome a conversation without attempting to belittle the very individual you invited into your home. And with that, Viola Davis turned and left the set. The studio froze. Phones were held up, eyes were open wide, and the silence was oppressive. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something that would be replayed, reposted, and remembered for a long, long time. You brought me here as a guest, Viola asserted, her tone unshakable. And you've treated me like some desperate thespian trying to get your approval. You've doubted my honor, discounted my opinion, and then, when I wouldn't take your disrespect lying down, you had the temerity to label me dramatic. The cameras kept rolling, and they would capture what would shortly become a moment in history in late-night television. The host helplessly gestured toward his producers, hoping for them to take over. But they were paralyzed, unsure if they should go to commercial or let this fall apart on live television. I apologize if you felt that I was being disrespectful, the host stated low and hesitantly. Viola's head cocked slightly, her voice lifting to match the gravity of the moment. If I feel disrespected, she repeated, regarding him with eyes narrowed against him. There's no if. You were disrespectful. That's not a feeling. That's a fact. She went on, her voice by this time ringing across the studio and riveting everyone's undivided attention. You criticized my career options, as if they had to pass your bar to be valid. You implied that I must validate myself in genres you deem acceptable. You trivialized the strong, real-life narratives I present as merely depressing. And when I spoke back to you, you called me dramatic. That is not observant criticism. That is dismissal, masquerading as curiosity. The host, who was perspiring now, attempted one last time to try and regain control. "Come on, perhaps I asked the wrong questions," he said, grasping at straws. "I was simply attempting to dig a little deeper than the typical promotional interviews. Just make the discussion more intriguing." Viola emitted a harsh laugh, cold, empty, without any amusement whatsoever. "Dig deeper," she repeated. "Is that really what you think you were doing? Breaking down my entire career to cliches and wondering why I haven't done more comedy. That isn't depth. That's complacency. That's bias. That's ignorance from somebody who ought to know better." Then, slowly and methodically, she raised her hand and started to take off her microphone. Each action was decisive, controlled, calculated. "You want to know what digging deeper is like," she went on. "It's asking about the emotional and physical work I do on each project. It's asking what I'm responding to in the stories and partners I choose. It's asking how I hold the burdens of the actual people I'm portraying on screen. It's not asking my worth as an artist. And it's definitely not implying that I need to lighten up to be respected." The host remained locked in place, staring at her as she released the mic pack and cradled it in her hand. "Viola, please," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his tone. "We can edit this out. We can begin again." Viola stood facing him now, her face stern, a combination of disappointment and unshakable resolve. "Edit this out?" she asked. "You think the solution is to pretend none of this happened? To erase the fact that you spent 20 minutes talking down to me on your platform? I think people should see exactly what kind of interview you conduct when you think no one's going to call you out." She set the mic on the side table next to her chair, placing it gently. Her words hung like a last chapter. "Look at the real tragedy here," she stated. "I came on this program eager to discuss a project that is of the utmost importance to me. I was prepared to bring attention to the amazing cast, the themes, the message, the effort. I was prepared to give your audience something that would resonate with them. But instead, I got to spend this time being reduced to a stereotype by someone who apparently didn't do his research." The studio was quiet. You could hear the gentle whir of the cameras, the gasping hold of the audience, each of them frozen, aware that they were seeing something special, something authentic. This was what you got when preparation clashed with prejudice. And Viola Davis was not going to let it pass. Not this time. Her tone was steady, unshaken. "This," Viola indicated around the studio, "it's what occurs when an individual thinks they know the limits of an artist without ever going out of their way to find out their purpose. This is what occurs when respect is lost for the need of a few viral one-liners. When individuals are more concerned with making a moment than with respecting the truth of a person's work." She grabbed her handbag and made her way slowly towards the door, the sound of her shoe heels ringing out in the empty room. She turned back once more before going off stage. I've worked my whole life demonstrating that I'm meant to be here. I've battled for every job, every chance, every step of acknowledgement. I will not sit here and allow someone who has not done a fraction of what I have done to wonder if I'm doing it correctly." The host attempted one last weak appeal. "Viola, please. I admire you. This was all a miscommunication." But she didn't blink. With her hand on the exit curtain, she turned to him and said, "The only misunderstanding here is yours. You misunderstood whom you were addressing. You misunderstood what respectful interviewing is. and you misunderstood what would occur when you push the envelope. Then her gaze swept the studio. Camera people, producers, audience, and millions viewing at home. I hope your audience can recognize the difference between entertainment and disrespect. Because what occurred here tonight, that wasn't entertainment. And with that, Viola Davis stepped off the set. She left behind a host sitting in stunned silence, an audience frozen in awe, and cameras still rolling, capturing every moment as she exited with the same grace, power, and dignity she entered with. She didn't storm out. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her truth had been spoken. And sometimes the strongest statement you can make is knowing when it's time to walk away. So what do you think? Was Viola Davis justified in refusing to back down and leaving that interview? Could she have done it another way and remained? Or was her departure the bravest, most important action of all? Drop your opinion in the comments below. Let us know what you think undefined, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that uncover what really goes down when cameras begin rolling and masks begin to slip.